Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to
Something else.
something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matala, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
Welcome to episode number 204 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes in this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 51 from June 25th, 2003 from Nashville, Tennessee. My name is Aria, and joining me as always is the Goldilocks to my Cindy. I fucked that one up. The Goldilocks to my Trinity. It's Cindy. Maybe it's the Goldilocks to my Cindy. It's Trinity. Am I talking to Cindy or Trinity?
I'd rather look like Trinity.
And I don't know, you know? And to be fair, I called you the Goldilocks to my Trinity. So are you standing there with long blonde hair and occasionally shoving a microphone in people's faces?
No, I gave that up years ago.
Are you secretly having sex with Eric Watts, the rest of the week when we're not recording a show?
No.
Okay, then. Well, I guess you're not Goldilocks. Damn. Anywho, welcome to the start of year 2, because somehow, some way, we made it through 1 year. And now we're going to try to do it again. So
It'll be better this year, we promise. Well, at least the next couple of weeks will be better.
No. We will be just fine. However, we do not control the quality of the program that we watch. Maybe if you let me take the 2-hour episode and slice it and dice it and to remove the shitty stuff from the show, and we just have a nice tight, 26 minutes, we would have a pretty good TNA every week. All right. Now that Cindy agrees with me on that one.
Not really.
So, this show, the sad part, to spoil things at the beginning for you, the sad part about this show is this is a better than average episode. However, when Cindy messaged me either earlier today or yesterday and told me that this was one of the best shows they did, by the time I finished watching this show, I was wondering if Cindy smoked some of the good stuff this week.
Nope.
Okay. We're going to get to some of this because, the 35 to 40 good minutes of this show definitely had its fight against the other hour plus of not the good stuff. Anyway, before we dive too far into this, I'll tell you what else is happening in TNA news this week, courtesy of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And the big one, and this was really, 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 really noticeable later in this show, the wrestlers were told they were no longer allowed to swear during promos. This is an edict from the higher-ups, and it led to yet another Vince Russo, Jeff Jarrett argument. Because apparently Vince Russo has no ability to have a conversation if he can't swear every other word. And so Russo, almost out of spite, took himself off the show for the most part. Oh well. Jarrett allegedly signed a 10-year deal with the NWA to lease the name, and the contract allegedly states that after 10 years, Jarrett has the chance to own the name outright. Now, we know, of course,
close.
that... Yes. We know, of course, that contract does not quite last 10 years. And And
Honestly,
then
I kind of wish that he owns it now instead of Billy Corgan. Have you tried watching NWA nowadays?
I haven't watched it the entire time that William Corgan has owned it.
You think the TNA stuff that we watch is awful? I posit this theory. Billy Corgan is worse than Vince Russo.
I refuse to believe that. There's literally no way on earth I could possibly believe that.
Billy Corgan allowed Jim Mitchell to snort cocaine on a pay-per-view and killed his TV deal.
Uh-huh. And tell me the next 24 things that Billy Corgan has done that were as bad as pretty much anything Vince Russo ever does. Because you know what? I'm not saying Billy Corgan is, the next coming of, the great bookers of all time. But I'm going to say that, well, I'm not going to give him a free pass. I'm going to say one stupid thing does not equal a career of stupid things. You give me Jim Mitchell snorting cocaine on pay-per-view, and I will give you that entire Sting Abyss storyline that segued into Abyss versus Judas Messias and went about a year and a half. And, I can just go, I can combat anything Billy Corgan has ever booked with any individual angle from that feud. And it will, and that is all pure Vince Russo. So, yeah.
I will also counter with the awfulness that is Kenzie Page's NWA Women's Title run.
Well,
2 years and she only does one move.
And Vince Russo put the WWF Women's Title on Sable, then Deborah. Let's see here. He put the WCW title on himself. He put the WCW Cruiserweight title on Medusa. And
that was actually not a bad idea. I'll take Medusa as WCW Cruiserweight Champion. Because if you're going to talk about badass women, female wrestlers, I'll take Medusa.
Which, in a division full of high-flying, fast-speed wrestlers, with the belt on Disco Inferno, Evan Courageous, Medusa, and Oklahoma. I will just leave it there. Anywho, Joey Styles officially turned down the offer to come in and do TNA talk, which is why that got dropped and never mentioned again. And let's see if we survive year 2 of this garbage show. The show begins with what is almost always the best 5 minutes of the show. The first 5 minutes where they recap last week's show. Not that last week's show is necessarily good, just that, hey, if you make anything a 5-minute video package, it's better than watching it for 2 hours. Then, because, we'll get to the reasons why, but then we get the main event on first. For some fucking reason, we get, as the opener of the show, Triple X versus AMW in a cage match for the World Tag Team titles. We'll get to the whys later, but again, if this is a shoot, why is the main event match on first? And you can't even say, well, they needed time to put the cage up because they needed time to take the cage down, and we got that later on. So it's important to note 2 things. First, they've wrestled about half a dozen times at this point, and Triple X has won every single one of them thanks to outside interference. Also, it is important to note that this is not the AMW Triple X cage match that you're thinking of. And of course, as we mentioned, every Triple X AMW match has ended in outside interference. Just a reminder that pretty much every match in TNA ends in outside interference, so why isn't every match a cage match?
Because let's face it, it would be a stupid gimmick to do. Oh, wait, Lockdown exists.
And then, you remember when we mentioned last week, or maybe the week before, that all the SEX guys kept coming out and no one ever mentioned SEX. No one was wearing the SEX t-shirts. The announcers didn't mention SEX. The only mention of Sports Entertainment Extreme was when Christopher Daniels cut a promo later in the show saying that year 2 of TNA would be the year of Sports Entertainment Extreme. That was the only mention of SEX on last week's show. This week, one of the first things out of Mike Tenay's mouth was that Vince Russo owns the rights to Sports Entertainment Extreme and won't let anyone in the group of people that he formed this group, put everybody in the group, and now is telling us that those people are not allowed to call themselves Sports Entertainment Extreme. And by the way, Tenay name dropped, the main people. He named dropped the Harrises and Glenn Gilberti and Sonny Siaki and Mike Sanders and David Young. You know who he didn't mention? The Rock and Roll Express. Meaning the Rock and Roll Express are still in Sports Entertainment Extreme, possibly to this day.
I watched ahead a few shows. That is considered no longer canon.
Well, I will wait to see if it ever gets mentioned again. Anyway, the bell rang and the match was on. Remember last week when referee Andrew Thomas manhandled Chris Harris and made him get in the corner while simultaneously allowing Triple X to double team nonstop? Rudy Charles manhandled James Storm into the corner while allowing Triple X to double team nonstop here in this cage match. Harris was bleeding early due to being sent into the cage. Storm got the first hot tag and got a near fall for power slam, but Daniels reversed momentum and sent Storm into the cage. Harris was wearing the literal definition of a crimson mask, while Storm looked like he cut his forehead while shaving. Skipper slipped while climbing to the top rope, but Tenay and West tried covering it by saying how much pain he was in. Harris and Skipper fucked up a spot that eventually led to Harris backdropping Skipper into the cage wall. At one point, Don West proclaimed, and this was a great line. Oh boy, listen to this one. Don West proclaimed, "There's a new side to Chris Harris we're seeing tonight in James Storm." How do you even analyze that? So there are different sides of Chris Harris inside James Storm, and the side that James Storm is throwing tonight is a different side of Chris Harris within James Storm?
Yes, it's more serious wrestler that the Chris Harris portrays rather than the cowboy that is James Storm that he usually portrays.
So at this point, we just broke down to a 4-way, and this is where the match picked up. Harris gave Skipper a super bomb off the top rope, and then Daniels a spear off the top rope a few minutes later. Skipper did a crossbody off the top of the fucking cage to Storm, which this is a big-ass cage. It had to be at least 10 feet from the mat to the top of the cage. And it was pretty rickety. It was not the most solid cage you've ever seen on this on a wrestling show.
No, this was a pretty poor cage.
And the fact that Skipper was able to stand up there, balance himself, and then do that dive is really saying something. And then Skipper goes back up top, or he tries to go back up top, but he gets knocked off and he falls to the outside of the cage. And so, yes, that means that after Triple X had been constantly outnumbering all of their opponents 3-on-2, that now Chris Daniels is locked in a cage 2-on-1 with America's Most Wanted. Now, of course, just ignore the fact that the last time Christopher Daniels was in a 2-on-1 handicap match, he won the tag team titles as that one person. But we're ignoring that for right now.
Well, that was also on a disqualification, and Jerry Lynn was an idiot.
Skipper spent the rest of the match trying to get back in, but kept being knocked off. Finally, AMW hit the death sentence on Daniels from the top of the cage for the win. If you told me that James Storm was afraid of heights, I'd believe you, because everybody at one point or another made their way towards the top of the cage except for James Storm. So there were a couple rough spots in this match, but it's still, not just the best match on the show, but the best match probably of the year so far in TNA. And I gave it an 8.5 out of 10.
I put this cage match up against their Turning Point cage match, where Elix did the cage walk. I will also put this match up against the X Division Triple Threat, the ladder match. And it's touch and go on which one is better. I just thought the genuine story of this match was better than the AJ low-key Jerry Lynn Triple Threat ladder match from a story perspective. In-ring perspective, touch and go. If I were to make a list of the 10 best TNA pay-per-view matches, like we're almost halfway through. Like we will be officially halfway through at the end of July. I would put this match on that list, and it will be very, very high.
Mm-hmm.
10 on 10. It's a 10.
Alrighty. So from here to Tenay and West, kill a few minutes previewing the rest of the show. And key to this, they say this is a jam-packed show. And when someone says it's a jam-packed show, that means this show is booked out. They've got, everything scheduled out already. There is no room to add more jam to the donut, so to speak. So out came D'Lo Brown, who informed us that he could not wait until the crew took the damn cage down. And I got to tell you, this was a pretty poor ring crew. About 4 minutes had passed at this point, and they didn't even get outside of the wall off yet. Anyway, D'Lo said his quest for the NWA title starts again now. Shouldn't he have said restarts? Anyway, he wants AJ to come and tell him why he went with Russo. Keep in mind, this is the same D'Lo Brown who sided with SCX 1 week in an effort to screw Jarrett out of the world title. But you're supposed to forget that, because it doesn't count. So keep in mind, D'Lo wants AJ to come out and tell him why he sided with Vince Russo. So out came AJ Styles, and he, by the way, he did not have the world title belt. In fact, I barely remember him being called the world champion, although it did say it on his chyron. And AJ came out to answer D'Lo's question as to why he sided with Russo. And before AJ could take the mic, D'Lo punched him in the face. That might explain why AJ didn't talk to him beforehand. If you wanted me to talk to you, Cindy, and every time I tried to, you punched me in the face, I wouldn't bother talking to you anymore. AJ finally raked the eyes and tried to run off, but randomly hung off the cage so D'Lo could jump into the cage and knock Styles to the floor. D'Lo broke a chair over AJ's back. No word on if that counted as a strategically placed weapon and thus got a point. D'Lo threw him and a chair back into the cage. A referee followed them in, and apparently this is now a match. Yes, we now have NWA World Champion AJ Styles versus D'Lo Brown in an unadvertised cage match. Now, the defenders of Broseph will tell you, well, bro, that's the reason why the Triple X match went first, bro, because it was then leading to this match, bro. Well, first of all, this is the first official match in the AJ Styles D'Lo Brown feud. It should not be a fucking cage match. It's the first fucking match. Secondly, the point of having stipulation matches is to advertise them so people will watch your show. In this case, people will buy your show. If you said a week ago, man, not only are we going to have Triple X and AMW in a cage match for the World Tag Team titles, but AJ Styles and D'Lo Brown are also going to be in a cage, it may not have sold one extra buy, but you would have at least been like, okay, we tried. We tried to, let the people know that we're doing this in an effort to try to make a couple more dollars. This was the opposite of trying to make money because unlike Vince Russo's Crash TV idea, you can't just flip through the channels and come across TNA on pay-per-view. You have to actually buy the pay-per-view. So the way to get people to buy it is if you tell people ahead of time, this is what's going to be on the show.
And not only that, I think it's more. I'd like to put a little bit of the blame on the ring crew because you said they were pretty lazy. I mean, you could have gotten, like you said earlier, you could have gotten one of these sides down in 4 minutes, which was the amount of time between match end and D'Lo coming out. One of those sides of the cage could have come down. And I think this should have been just a plain. This would have been better a couple minutes after. There's some pre-tapes. Spoiler alert, there's some pre-tapes in the show that don't air and kind of ruin some storytelling near the end. It is very, very apparent later on. Also of note, did you see AJ Styles' shirt that he was wearing?
Didn't pay attention to it.
FMW Ring of Honor shirt on TNA. You couldn't have him wear his own shirt. So Ring of Honor thanks you for the free advertising. But the match itself was pretty decent.
Well, did you notice, there's a lot of problems with this match, but did you notice the first big problem with this match?
No bell ringing to signify that was an actual match?
Exactly. When did the bell ring to start the match? It never did.
The same thing can be said for another match on this card. A bell does not ring. No, wait, no. No, yeah, I think it is. Let me take a look at my notes. Continue.
So AJ slammed the cage door into D'Lo's head. In 1982, that popped the territory. Here in 2003, it was a move done about 30 seconds before D'Lo made his comeback. D'Lo went to the top of the cage, theoretically for a frog splash. However, the world champion had to be saved by the biggest badass in the company, and Vince Russo gets into the cage, shoves down the referee, and then AJ threw a chair at D'Lo's head, and then in this steel cage match, we got a disqualification in the steel cage match. Now, this motherfucker. Is Vince Russo legitimately the dumbest motherfucker in the history of pro wrestling? And
No.
Before somebody out there screams, well, Ric Flair and Lex Luger did a DQ in a cage match in Capital Combat 90. Well, guess what? Just because it happened before doesn't make it a good idea. Plus, what was the DQ for? Was it for interference, which again happens in every TNA match? Was it for shoving the referee down, which happens at about half the matches in TNA? Or was it for AJ throwing a chair at D'Lo's head, which not only happens multiple times a show, was done multiple times in this match?
No, I don't think Russo's the biggest dumbass in pro wrestling. Not even close.
AJ continued to hit D'Lo with weapons while Russo screamed. Jeff Jarrett marched down but was stopped by red shirt security. Yes, the same Jeff Jarrett who regularly booked himself to beat up entire factions by himself now could not overpower 2 security guys. Anyway, AJ gave D'Lo a Styles Clash on the chair, and Russo ordered the referee to count to 3, which the referee refused to do, meaning the only person who's a bigger badass than Vince Russo on this show is Andrew Thomas, the referee. So the winner is allegedly D'Lo Brown, and I gave this a 3.0 out of 10.
I didn't grade it. No opening bell.
Outside, the Gathering was still worried about Raven when Shane Douglas appeared and attacked Julio and Alexis. Julio accidentally superkicked Alexis and took a belly-to-belly suplex on a conveniently placed guardrail. Keep in mind, last week, the only time we saw the Gathering was when they were sitting outside saying that Raven was going to be mad at them. And this week, they're in the exact same spot talking about Raven. And this is their only appearance. So I got to tell you, these two, it can't be that hard to find Raven. We've found Raven 8 million times over the past couple months on this show. But Julio and Alexis are really, really bad at it. And so Shane stormed into the arena, stormed to the ringside area where the ring crew was finally taking the cage down. Shane grabbed the mic and walked to Raven's perch. Shane explained he wanted to kick Raven's ass because Shane won the NWA title in 1994 and threw it down, and is mad that Raven is trying to resurrect the NWA title because they were both in ECW. Just want to point out that Sabu once tried to win the NWA title. Steve Corino is a former NWA World Champion. And Shane Douglas apparently didn't give a fuck about them. Only gives a fuck about Raven trying to win it.
I think it's because... wait, when was Steve Corino NWA champion?
2001.
He was probably knee-deep in Rob Black's porn stash, so he was font, so didn't care.
Anyway, so he said he sold his soul to an old friend to dance with the devil. And I wrote, for some reason, Shane wouldn't say the word ass and instead is using every slang word for ass, which was before I noted that, Jarrett said no more swearing, and apparently ass counts as a swear. Oh, I should note that in addition to this, they no longer do the pre-tapes as pre-tapes. So everything is live, which is why New Jack was able to drop an F-bomb in a segment later on, in case we get to that point. So Raven showed up and we had a fight on the steps. It's dangerous to fight on the steps. Suddenly, main event Glenn Gilberti showed up to help Shane Douglas, and CM Punk showed up to try to help Raven, but got his ass kicked in CM Punk's only appearance on this show. Jeff Jarrett ran out and threw a chair at Douglas and Gilberti, getting himself disqualified. Wait, that was the last match. And so, yeah. So the main event push of main event Glenn Gilberti isn't quite over.
But it will soon end it'll end tonight. And there's reason why.
So thoughts on this?
This segment was fine. I mean, I really liked Douglas's promo. I understood what he was going for. Because him throwing the belt down is pretty much the only thing he's known for the past decade. Other than bitching about Ric Flair. So if Raven wins the title, Douglas sees it as a slight against what he stood for because he was an ECW, I guess, and approved of what Douglas did. But you know what? It was fine. Set up the main event, set up a match at the end of the show, so at least it led to something. Even though, to be honest, Jarrett and Gilberti are kind of bit players in the Raven-Douglas feud.
We got a random Sting video package in black and white. And it was done to tell us that next week there's going to be a sit-down interview where Sting is interviewed by Mike Tenay. All right, then.
This happens all throughout July.
Remember last week when Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible had like a 2-minute match that ended weirdly? Well, this week Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible have a 3-minute match that ends weirdly, and to make it even weirdlier, it's a lights out anything goes match. So while it's not quite the first match of the feud, it's the second match of the feud. It is a lights out cage match, a lights out anything goes match. Now, for those listening to this and you're thinking about, when AEW did like Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega, and actually did a couple of matches over the summer before they were on TV with like Moxley and Joey Janela in a lights out match and other shit like that. If you're thinking that Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible are going to do anything like that, please stop thinking that.
Yes,
And
because I would rather have this than Moxley and Janela being idiots.
And hey, what better way to follow 2 cage matches than with a lights out match? Kurt Herron is the referee. Now, you, dear listener, may be wondering, who the fuck is Kurt Herron? Well, that is unimportant. It's important enough to tell us it's Kurt Herron is the referee, but not important enough to explain who the hell he is. They tried to say that none of the referees wanted to referee this match between Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible because their feud has just gotten way too violent. Their feud where they fight backstage, which is what every goddamn feud in this company does. Anyway, they started fighting outside the arena, made their way into the arena. Lynn threw Justin shoulder first in the Lollipop's cage, which somehow injured Lollipop. Lynn goes for cradle pile driver on the ramp, but got backdropped. Lynn went for That's Incredible. Lynn got out of that and performed an O'Connor roll for the pin. Yes, a lights out match that ended with an O'Connor roll. That is a new one. After the match, Credible attacked Lynn and threw him into a barricade. Credible handcuffed Lynn's hands over his head to the bars of the dancer cage and then hit him in the ribs and face with the chair. So yes, after a lights out anything goes match, this feud must continue. And I think I gave it 1 point for every minute it lasted. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10.
I gave it a slightly better score of 4 out of 10. I thought it was fine, I guess. I mean, I do think these two have good chemistry together. I don't think this is the end of the feud because we'll have a post-match. And the Cosmic Ballet goes on as we head into the name-redacted locker room. We have Glenn Gilberti still trying to be a leader of men. He berates Triple X for losing the tag titles. He tells Sabin to hold on to the X title. Tells Sonny Siaki to win the hard 10. And he'll go after Jeff Jarrett because, of course.
See, now, he didn't just tell Daniels that they need to win the tag titles back. He slapped Daniels. He didn't tell Sabin he needed to retain the X Division title. He told Sabin he needed to retain the Cruiserweight title.
Oops.
And then he said that we need to get Shark Boy's mask. Keep in mind, these are his goals for tonight. We'll see how well everybody achieves their goals. All right. So then we get Chris Sabin versus Frankie Kazarian in a non-title match. Well, good news for Glenn, because Sabin can't lose the title in a non-title match. Now, we have said this repeatedly over the past year. Jeremy Borash, during every match a champion has, whether it doesn't even have to be a singles match, during any match that has a champion in it, he will call them the reigning and defending champion. And typically that gets ignored. Well, this
Mhm.
week they could not ignore it, and Tenay and West probably spent a good 15 seconds reiterating that this is a non-title match. And so I'm thinking someone's going to finally have that talk with Borash they should have last year. So Saban's theme, they've already started sampling the Hail Saban inside the theme. He hasn't yet, it doesn't yet start with Hail Saban, but I'm sure that's coming very shortly. So these two literally had a match on Impact at the end of 2023. So what I'm saying is these two have wrestled a lot over the years, and they have really, really good chemistry. Now it really tells you because these two, again, like now they've been in wrestling over 20 years each, but at this point they'd both been wrestling less than 3 years. They're both still green. And this crowd, which has now seen 2 cage matches and a lights out anything goes match, is dead for the professional wrestling match. And Don West basically tried covering for the crowd not being into this by pointing that out. Saban did a flip dive out of the ring and introduced Kazarian to the ring steps. If you told me Kaz has never been sent into the ring steps before, I'd believe you. He was very awkward about it, and like I doubt he even touched the steps because they didn't even move. They reversed a bunch of roll-ups into a series of 2 counts. The crowd finally got into it when Kazarian went to the top rope. Saban ran up behind him and did a German suplex overhead throw. Kazarian hit the wave of the future for a near fall. The problem with that, because the crowd didn't really, acknowledge it. The problem is he's had 2 matches. This is his first singles match, and so his finisher has not been established enough to the point where the crowd went, "Oh, Saban just kicked out of his finisher." Kazarian then debuted the Flux Capacitor, which is the one-man Spanish fly from the top rope, to pick up the win. And to be honest, I was ready to be pissed because I was like, he hit the Flux Capacitor. It's the first time he's ever hit this move in TNA, and they're going to fucking have Saban kick out of it. Nope. Saban stayed down. And Kazarian picks up the non-title win over our X-Division champion. This was a good match that became a great match by the end. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I thought this match was really, really great. I mean, It's just. Plus, these two have a feud built in. I mean, they built this as the future versus the future. And Saban had been talking about this on, I think, a couple of weeks ago when Scott Hudson was interviewing him and complained about it because they brought up Kazarian.
Poor Scott Hudson, not around anymore. Oh well,
give it time.
He'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. He'll be back. Let me see what Dave said about this match. The crowd was dead for most of this match. The guys were doing big moves and ear falls over the place, and the crowd couldn't get the crowd to care. Both guys are tremendous athletically, and Saban as a worker, considering he's this good at 21 with 2 years in, has incredible in-ring potential. Yada, yada, yada. Fans finally recognized what they were seeing after Saban did this top rope German suplex and Kazarian flew into lunar orbit. The last few minutes had great reaction. He did not give a star rating to that, but did say the cage match was 4.25 stars, which means in the grand scheme of things, he agreed with my rating. So, all right. By the way, I got to pull up the right thing because I was doing a Halloween Havoc 93 before we did this. So I still have that open on my computer. So, yeah, these two will wrestle again once or twice or 204 times. So backstage, Goldilocks is now with Shane Douglas, who has a lot to say. He says after 22 years in wrestling, he is an expert. So if Jeff Jarrett wants to stick his Memphis nose in his business, then they should have a tag match. First of all, it's his Henderson nose, or Hendersonville nose, not his Memphis nose. And he then says that they should have a tag match. And I thought this show was jam-packed. So how do we have space for multiple bonus matches on this show? The jam overfloweth like an overfilled jelly donut. Now, it is important to note that at no point in Shane Douglas's promo, either earlier in the show or right here or at any point in his, I'm about to bet in his fucking life, have the words Glenn Gilberti or Glenn Gilberti come out of his mouth. Despite that, somehow Mike Tenay Don West knew that Shane Douglas not only wanted a tag match, but he wanted to team with Glenn Gilberti. And I don't care if you tell me that that makes sense based on the angle earlier. If Shane wants a team with Glenn Gilberti, I know Shane Douglas can open his mouth and speak. He would have said it. But somehow we're just left to make that assumption instead.
I called it a typical Shane Douglas shouty promo.
Your rear end franchised. All right. Hey, remember last week when Goldilocks was locked in the cage with Abyss? It never got explained what the hell happened to her, because this week she's just out interviewing people, and this week Eric Watts is going to wrestle Kid Cash. Now, I gotta admit, I made a slight boo-boo here, because while Eric Watts was getting in the ring and he was parading around being Eric Watts, there was a dark-haired woman in her underwear standing outside the ring. And I'm like, oh, Trinity's with Eric Watts this week. Turns out it wasn't Trinity. I figured that out later when Trinity disappeared, and I went back to the beginning of the match because I'm like, wasn't fucking Trinity out there at the beginning? No, it was Athena. As a lover of dark-haired women, I can tell you TNA has too many dark-haired women right now. So the good news about this match is that Kid Cash is really good about being flung around by bigger opponents. The bad news is Kid Cash had to get the heat on Eric Watts. In fact, this match was so bad at points, I was pretty confident that 2003 Bill Watts could have had a better match than his kid. Now, there is nothing necessarily wrong with a match where the heel is so much smaller than the face, but Kid Cash is not Chris Benoit. Kid Cash is not Eddie Guerrero. Kid Cash is not Rey Mysterio. Just giving you 3 examples of people who are shorter who could believably have matches with people much bigger than them and have you ignore their height difference. You could not ignore it here, and even if you could, Eric Watts was not the right guy to be having this match with Kid Cash. The referee got bumped. Watts laid out Cash with a powerbomb, went out, ran Abyss, who laid Watts out with a black hole slam, and Cash won. And this is when I was wondering what the hell happened to Trinity, because after the match, Goldilocks ran out to check on Watts, and I'm like, whatever happened to Trinity? This match went way too long. Yep. It went like 8 minutes. And hopefully, like a college basketball player, it is one and done. And somehow, despite all of that positivity I said about the match, I still gave it a 1.5 out of 10, which is about a point higher than I was expecting as I was ranting.
It was a 3 out of 10 for me. I thought the match was too long. You know, this could have been a 5-minute match. Would have got the job done.
I guess a 3-minute match would have been better. Alrighty.
Maybe, I guess.
So
and it still means
next.
Oh, now we have one of the. Now we get a highlight of.
Well, no, that's
following year.
That's after the next segment. So up next we have 2 comedy segments, and I'm gonna bet you my left arm that one member of this team liked one a whole lot more than the other one did, and vice versa. So first I'm going to go to Cindy to tell you about the one that she undoubtedly liked a lot more. Let's go to Cindy to explain this one.
So we have the interrogator segment. And just a reminder, because we haven't seen it in a while, it's usually Tenay and West asking questions to somebody. just rapid fire questions. In this case, it is Konnan and Truth asking the questions. And then you have BG James portraying Don West in what he would actually wear. The shiny red shirt, shiny red tie. And he hits all of the greatest Don West hits. Like selling the Hoovy Juice calendar. A Barry Bonds rookie card he just happened to have out of his pocket. Also saying that he banged Rod Killing's mom. And also, I think the best part was at the end was the group hug and him saying, "Go Red, go! Go Red, go!" Because he was Red's biggest cheerleader in TNA, even as far as 2009 when Don West was a manager / hype man for Red, who became X Division champion with manager Don West.
Technically, he won the X Division title, and then Don West became his manager.
So here's the scary part. Don West, as a manager, has had more champions in his stable than Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation, Slick, and all the years he managed. I can't say Fuji because he had Yoko.
Now, there's an asterisk on a couple of those. Plus, Fuji managed Demolition, who were the longest reigning WWF Tag Team Champions for like 30 years. So there's an asterisk on a couple of those. First, it's not Ted DiBiase's fault that the Head Shrinkers went and lost the tag titles the night before SummerSlam 94, because Bam Bam and IRS held up their part of the deal and beat the Head Shrinkers at SummerSlam. So they should have been the tag team champions. But
we'll blame Shawn Michaels for bitching to Vince about he wants 2 belts.
Well, he didn't have any belts at the time, so.
Well, he had 1 belt.
No. Diesel was the Intercontinental Champion. He had 0 belts.
Well, 1 belt because of the tag title.
Yes, but you just said Shawn wanted 2 belts.
Let's shut up and move on.
All right. And then also Butch Reed was supposed to get the Intercontinental title at the time the Honky Tonk Man did it, but he apparently missed the TV taping or that's the story. Who knows if that really is a story or if that's real or not. But the story is that Butch Reed, missed the TV taping and Honky Tonk Man got the IC title. And let's be honest, if it was really that important that they needed Butch Reed to win the belt, like they did those marathon TV tapings on back-to-back days. They could have just had Butch Reed beat Ricky Steamboat on Wrestling Challenge instead of Superstars. And then whatchamacallit? Oh yeah, and also, and this is also important to note, titles did not change hands like multiple times a month in the 80s and early 90s like they would later on. So I mean now, like especially nowadays, if you said, "Oh well, Amazing Red is a more successful wrestler, for instance, than I don't know Junkyard Dog because Amazing Red is a 3-time X Division champion or something, and Dog never won a title in a national promotion." Well, the first part of what you said is accurate, but like if titles changed hands back then and there were as many titles as there are nowadays, JYD would have been a 10-time champion of something. But
probably,
so it's not a fair comparison.
And I wasn't even going that route. I'm just saying winning a title.
So I still keep a pin in this stuff because I guess they didn't really make fun of Tenay here as much. But BG James is a Vince Russo guy, and Vince Russo despises Mike Tenay. So any segment that's designed to make fun of the announcers, I just tune out because, like Bill Watts said when he made Jim Cornette redo an interview, Jim Cornette is not going to be wrestling Jim Ross on any of his shows. So go out there and do a promo for the matches that are actually happening. Like 3 Live Crew are never going to wrestle Mike Tenay and Don West. So it's like, in fact, nobody's going to wrestle Mike Tenay and Don West. So like all these people randomly cutting promos on them and all this other shit, it's a waste of time. So I'll say this. I would have marked out if BG James would have somehow found a way to work in a Jim Mint 10 reference when he pulled out the Barry Bonds card. But oh well.
It couldn't have been
then
Jim Mint 10 because it wasn't in a hard case.
Do you think anybody watching this would have known that?
Yes. Knowing what's going on with... Yeah.
I disagree. Anyway, then we get to what,
you
in
don't
my
have
opinion,
any faith in our audience. Our audience is intelligent.
Our audience wasn't watching TNA in 2003. I'm not talking about our audience. We are not paying $10 a month for this, or $10 a week for this shit. I'm talking about the people who actually bought these fucking pay-per-views and went to these damn shows. I doubt any of them knew what made something Jim Mint 10.
That's why BG never did it.
I doubt 90% of them even knew the phrase Jim Mint 10. But if you're going to go like, because it's not like, yeah, we know Don West was the pitchman for a late night shopping network, but it's not like that was ever part of his character on TV. So if we're going to make fun of him for being a TV pitchman, even though it's never been said on TV, then let's just go all the way with it. But anyway, we go from that to what, in my opinion, is the far superior comedy segment. Shark Boy is sitting in a kiddie pool outside the arena when New Jack comes up and is yelling at him that he wants Shark Boy to go scout his Hard 10 match, or not his Hard 10 match, but the Hard 10 match coming up, because New Jack is facing the winner in the finals next week. And Shark Boy, who is mute, is sitting there in the kiddie pool, and he's like gesturing because they have a monitor there. And Jack's like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I want you to go there and watch the match and scout the match. And then he got Jack into the pool because they were playing a ring toss game onto an inflatable octopus. And then with Jack saying that his britches were wet. That is funny. The preposterousness of New Jack teaming with Shark Boy, and then them both sitting in a kiddie pool playing a ring toss game is funny.
You're also forgetting one of the best lines. New Jack didn't want to.
He said that black people don't like water, and the last time they put black people on a boat, it wasn't fun.
And the ride wasn't fun, yeah.
Yes.
I liked both of these segments.
What was that?
I liked both of these segments.
Yes, but in my opinion, that second one is far, far superior to the first one here.
And I should also say that this is why I wish Explosion... You know how AEW, when they had Dark and Elevation, they would scroll what happened underneath?
Yes.
Probably to get you to watch on YouTube. Oh, this person was on? Hey, I saw this guy locally. I'll watch him. I'll watch him after I'm watching Dynamite, or... Yeah, Dynamite, because back then they said Dynamite didn't have Rampage yet.
That was cute when they were doing it at first, when it was a 1-hour show that had like 3 matches and Cody Rhodes would do an interview with somebody. Like when it got to the point where it was like a 3-hour show with like squash matches galore with nothing but, your local talent losing a match, it's like, I can't imagine anybody in Chicago caring that a local Massachusetts indie guy, did a job on Dark this week. And vice versa, I went to Rampage the weekend of Brawl Out, and they did a taping for Dark Elevation, and it was just one match after another, and it was like, man, this is a show for the sickos, to say the least. They did
Well,
do
you're
a
also
Claudio
talking to someone
Castagnoli.
who loved back in the day WCW Saturday Night, Worldwide and Pro.
Yes, well, I mean, as somebody who would also watch all those goddamn shows, even in the year 2000, when I didn't have a life, even when I didn't have a life as an adult, I had more of a life than to sit around watching 3 hours of Dark and Elevation every week. And I think most people would tend to agree with that. And it's like, and here's the problem. Like, the problem was, like, like, with AEW, they're like, oh, wins and losses matter. They don't. They do so they can have your record at the bottom of the screen and say, "Oh, look, Hikaru Shida's won 200 matches," and you're like, "She's had like 10 matches on Dynamite. How the hell did she win 200 matches?" It's like, "Oh, because she beat every town's local female star on Dark." It's like, but Hikaru Shida didn't get into a bigger spot because she won 190 matches on Dark. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like she got into a bigger match, or a bigger spot because she'd win matches on Dynamite, which in theory, yeah, it's important to win matches on Dynamite. It's important to win matches at all. But like, people losing matches on Dynamite shouldn't then have matches on Dynamite next week. The people who won matches on Dark should now have the matches on Dynamite because they're being elevated because they won a match, showing that wins and losses matter. But ultimately, they don't, because ultimately, like, I love Sunny Kiss, but we'd been watching Sunny Kiss 8 times out of 10 on Dynamite. And, they had bigger and better stars, once the roster started expanding. And man, and I thought I'd get into a rant about shit on the Tuesday show a lot. We haven't recorded it yet, but yesterday's show, just looking at the notes that I made for while watching Mid-South and World Class, yesterday's show is going to be one for the history banks if you get a chance to check that out.
So, where are you timeline wise on World Class? Are you after Star Wars?
Which Star Wars? They do a Star Wars show like every couple months. So you got to be specific. We are in June of '84. This week on World Class, they announced that Kerry lost the NWA title back to Ric Flair. I'd say spoiler for the show that hasn't been taped yet, but it's a show that dropped yesterday.
So we are getting started around this time where the bottom will soon start to fall out.
Oh yeah, like legitimately, if it was not for Gino Hernandez just showing up, I guarantee we would have quit watching World Class and started watching something else, because like this fucking Von Erichs Freebirds feud has been going on for a year and a half. Chris Adams has been feuding with fucking Jimmy Garvin since September. It's been 10 months. It's not to saying it's not a good match. It's not to say the crowd wasn't into the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, but Jesus Christ, it's time to move on to something else. Now, with that said, and I gotta give credit to SMU Heavyweight on Twitter. His name is Lance. He was alive and back and following World Class back in the Dallas days. The Von Erichs Freebirds feud ended in September of '84, and there's like a pretty big show that they do. So we're almost done the fucking feud, and at least it was still drawing, even though watching in 2025, it's getting repetitive and redundant.
Right, because during that time, the Freebirds would go to WWF, realize they hate it, and then go to...
I think they went to Georgia and,
yeah,
a little bit all over the place. All right. So Sonny Siaki versus the Sandman in a Hard 10 tournament semifinal match. Do you realize, Cindy, this TNA's been on for a year. They have done half a dozen tournaments, maybe if around half a dozen, I think would be a nice, generous way to say it.
They've done too many.
Okay. This is the first tournament that they have done that they're booking one match a week for 7 weeks. This was the only tournament that they realized, wait a second, we have, we have another show next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that. Remember when at least I ranted about that X Division double elimination thing they did on the second show? And I was like, you could have taken that and had one match a week for 7 weeks and really built it up and like had a real fucking banger of a tournament, and instead they just blew it off in a 30-minute match one week, which again, it was a really good 30-minute match. Don't get me wrong, but like they could have spread that out over 7 weeks and really had something there. But anyway, the Hard 10 tournament, the only tournament in TNA history that went 1 week at a time. Well, TNA history up to this point. And because I'm sure, even though I'm blanking on another one at this point, I'm sure someone will say, well, don't you remember that tournament in 2016 where EC3 won the Bound for Glory tournament to get a title shot with Lashley? And I'll say,
Nobody cares.
no. I'll say, no, I only remember that he won the damn thing. Partially also because Trey and I were just talking about the Bound for Glory series earlier, and he asked if they only did 3 of them, and I'm like, I remember that EC3 tournament, and I'm like, I don't remember if it was called the Bound for Glory series, but it was just an 8-man single elimination tournament as opposed to a round robin gimmick. Anyway, back to this. Siaki attacked Sandman during his entrance before the bell rang, but somehow that counted as getting a point because he hit Sandman with 2 trash can lids. Shouldn't that have been 2 points? So anyway, I'm pissed off at Sonny Siaki because he blew his spot. Here's what I wrote. Here is every Hard 10 match. They hit each other with weapons until both get to at least 5 points, and then one of them goes through the table for the win. And then Siaki blew the spot intentionally by putting Sandman through the table 1 point too soon. So he has 9 points. I think Sandman had 2 at this point. Sandman lit a cigarette during the match and gave it to referee Andrew Thomas to hold. Siaki then took Sandman's cigarette and took a drag, and I was convinced that one of them was going to hit the other one with a cigarette for a point, but that didn't happen here. The finish was Sandman doing a senton through Siaki on a table, giving him an 11-9 win. So yes, I said last week, because I do not know for a fact that the Sandman wins. I think the Sandman wins the tournament, which is why I thought he was wrestling Mike Sanders in the finals, also because they were pushing Mike Sanders over and over again for like 3 weeks with his Hard 10 thing. So I'm like, okay, it's going to be Sandman and Mike Sanders in the finals. Then when New Jack won last week, I'm like, well, they're not going to do face versus face, so Siaki's going to win here. So I was a little surprised that Siaki lost here. And so next week, it's going to be exactly what you expect it to be. I get Sonny Siaki's not like the greatest worker in the world, but there's a better spot for him than in a hardcore match.
Yeah, and we're going to find that spot later tonight.
Well, New Jack and Sandman, that is I haven't watched it yet, but it is going to be exactly what New Jack versus the Sandman is. Like, you are not watching that match and mad because they're wasting somebody with actual in-ring talent. Like, it's exactly what you're going to expect. They're not going to have a chain wrestling match.
Yeah, they're not going to be like Big Show and Kane 1 week in 2006. Remember that match?
Yes, that was because Big Show, that's because Kane it was during the May 19th shit, and Big Show was trying to somehow put Kane in a good mood by having a grappling match with him, where they did go behinds and reverse hammerlocks and whatnot. Anyway, New Jack cut a promo. Actually, after the match, Sandman went to shake Siaki's hand, and Siaki didn't say no. Instead, New Jack ran out to have a stare down with Sandman, so Siaki bailed. Jack cut a promo and said they've been up and down the road, but next week they're going to beat the crap out of each other, and then they toasted a beer. Hey, you know what? As much bitching as I do, they had a match, somebody won, somebody lost, and we built to a match next week with higher stakes. It's almost as if the dipshit who writes this thing has a semi clue of an idea of what to do and has to constantly push that down, bro. Anyway, despite the fact that I've somehow put this match over a lot more than you would think, it's a hard 10 match. It's the same exact match you see all the time. 1.5 out of 10.
3 out of 10, same thing.
What'd you give it?
Also, a 3 out of 10. Also, need to remind everybody, I don't care
Don't
much for
say
star
it.
ratings.
Don't say it. The point of ratings is that it's what we both feel about a match. It doesn't matter how we view the match. This is your opinion of the quality of the match.
Yeah, but you kind of base yours off of the Meltzer star rating system.
Not necessarily. If we reviewed Al Snow and Head versus Too Much, I'd give that match I'd give that match 5 stars. And Dave, I'm pretty sure, had a negative sign in front of that 5 stars.
Well, that's because Dave Meltzer hates fun. And plus, he needs to clean his office. It's a pigsty.
I'd like to hope why did he print out everything? I mean, I hope he doesn't still do that, but it's like he knows you don't have to print out every single email you get. You can just have them there to reference. And I guess, hey, whatever works for him, but at this point, if you read the Observer, it's seen better days. Anyway, Goldilocks is with Jeff Jarrett, who said he has never backed down from a challenge and said the real question is if Raven is up to the challenge. In walked Raven, who said that Jarrett is near the top of his least favorite people. After they left, Siaki barged in and wanted to know where Russo was.
Okay.
Then,
now, hold on. This is why I think this stuff was still pre-taped and some stuff got cut out. Because A, Siaki just had a match. He had this segment and he was fresh as a daisy. I'm gonna skip ahead. And you'll understand why. So Goldie goes with Siaki to find Vince Russo. We then have another segment with Goldie with Siaki. Siaki is selling what happened on the Hard 10 match, which he didn't do in the previous segment, which aired after the Hard 10 match. She says in that segment that they saw Siaki talking with Russo. That never aired. So something got cut. That was it.
What got cut? What got cut?
What got cut? Thank you for the cheap seats reference.
Hey, who doesn't love the Sklar's? They were on Night Court before it got canceled.
Yeah, and they still kind of do cheap seats.
Well, they're probably still producing it for ESPN Classic. The problem is ESPN Classic isn't a thing anymore.
They're doing it on their own website, thingamabobber. So Sonny Siaki says there's going to be a few changes. Trinity comes out for no reason and starts choking out Goldilocks.
Yes, Trinity turned heel for no good reason. 1 week after they had that music video, or not music video, but they had the highlight package where she was doing cool shit, like on motorcycles and whatnot. And it's like, where they're like, hey, look at this cool chick doing cool shit. Now she's turning heel because, of course she is, bro.
Yeah, I didn't get it at all. So that's why I jumped ahead. Because
in between that,
it's production that matters, and that was awful production. You should have had that Goldie, Goldie, Jarrett, Raven, Siaki segment before the Hard 10.
All right, so in between that, Shark Boy was still in his pool and is now getting beaten up by Mike Sanders. Mike Sanders tried to unmask him and failed. Then he tried to destroy the inflatable octopus shark he had and failed at that too. So let it be known, the only goal that Team Glenn achieved this week was Chris Sabin did not lose the X Division title, and that was only because it was a non-title match. And by the way, if this was a big goal that for whatever reason Disco decided that they had to remove Shark Boy's mask, why did they only send one person? Where are the Harrises? Where is David Young? Hell, we've never been told what happened to Desire. Now, I know she got injured. You know she got injured. It's never been said on TV she's been injured.
They
She's
wrote
just-
her off via stomach injury, I guess.
Well, she took, wasn't it David Young that she took to the hospital the 1 week?
Yeah.
That's how they wrote her off at this point.
hmm
And so next week, we get the hard sell for next week. We're going to have the interview with Sting. We're going to have New Jack versus the Sandman. We're going to have America's Most Wanted defending the tag team titles against, and who they're defending the tag titles against doesn't matter because while literally they're in the middle of saying David Young and Jerry Lynn walks up because an hour plus later, he still has not cleaned the blood off of his face. He grabbed the microphone and informed us that he and Just Incredible will have a Russian chain match next week. So the logical follow-up to a anything goes unsanctioned match is a Russian chain match, which in theory is a sanctioned match. Okay. Do you remember in like 2012 when TNA would randomly on Impact they'd have open fight night where people could just go out for no rhyme or reason? They could just go out and make a challenge to any match, and whoever you challenged had to come out, and it was completely arbitrary as to who came out and got to make a challenge.
Yeah, and it was one of the stupidest things I've seen.
The only time, by the way, that ever worked was there was one episode Impact during the Bound for Glory series, and it was basically the top 6 point getters got to come out and challenge somebody in the BFG series to a match. It was the only one that actually made sense because it made sense that A, who was able to make the choice to wrestle who, and B, well, that was basically it. That's what it was. Anyway, apparently Jerry Lynn and America's Most Wanted have the open fight night capabilities because the last 2 weeks they've both come out and informed us about a match that they were going to have. Where is Bullet Bob Armstrong to approve these matches? Where's Bill Behrens? Was it Bill Behrens? No, it wasn't Bill Behrens. Who was the fat guy? Burt Prentice, who was backing down Conan for like 3 weeks. What the hell ever happened to Burt Prentice?
I think he and TNA severed relationships.
They wished each other well in their future endeavors.
Yeah.
And then Burt Prentice will say, I never wish them well. And by the way, we're also going to get Eric Watts versus Abyss. And by the way, we keep saying Abyss because it's Abyss, but he doesn't have a name yet.
Yeah, he's still the monster.
He or Big Scary Guy, too.
Yeah.
His name was Abyss in Puerto Rico. So that's kind of what everyone's assuming they're going to go with. And spoiler alert, that's what they go with. All right. And then we get the Goldilocks segment with Sonny Saki you mentioned earlier before we get our main event tag team match. Now, if this is real, we're supposed to believe that our jam-packed show, the main event, the scheduled main event segment, was Goldilocks interviewing the loser of the Hard 10 match.
Fun.
That was the main event segment. Thankfully, Shane Douglas was like, dude, I want a tag team match. We're like, oh, wow, by sheer coincidence, we have an extra 12 minutes at the end of the show. We can just plug you right in there. So Raven and Shane fight on the ramp during Raven's entrance. I wrote, at least Jarrett did not wait for his music to play to run in and make the save.
Can we talk about music for a second? Shane Douglas's theme.
Okay, that's a second. Go ahead.
What the hell was that?
That is, we had 1 week to come up with something, and we just went through the TNA library, and that's what we found.
I mean, you couldn't make a quick ripoff of Perfect Strangers. Granted, they do I think next week, he gets his actual theme. Like the theme that he used in EC. Huh?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Not that Perfect Strangers.
I thought that's what we were talking about. Get a feeling just to feed somebody.
No.
Some,
you know the dear.
Standing tall on the wings of my dream, rise and fall on the wings of my dream. The rain and thunder, the wind and haze, bound for better days. My life, my dream.
Nothing can stop me now.
Now, see, if Shane Douglas came out to that, we would not be complaining if Shane Douglas came out to that Perfect Strangers theme song.
No, because it's just funny as if he came out to the old Pan Flute Wild. If Moxley came out to the old Pan Flute Wild thing, which he did.
So this match was like, do you remember like when WWE did a Battle Royal on Raw the one time in like 2012, and like Wade Barrett broke his arm, and there was like one injury after another happening in that match? It was like the most cursed Battle Royal in like wrestling history.
I was wondering if you're going to talk about that. Yeah.
This match was cursed. Okay, we'll start with this. Jeff Jarrett did not get injured. However, Jeff Jarrett blew up, which is amazing because A, it's a 10-minute tag match, and B, it's Jeff Jarrett, who's in tremendous shape. But he blew up somehow. But that is Jeff Jarrett's contribution to the injury report on this match. All right, Glenn Gilberti came into this match with a bad back. It got worse. At one point, Raven did that spot he does where he gives one person a bulldog and gives another person a clothesline. Well, it was mistimed, and Glenn landed weird. I think he landed on Raven's foot, and he injured his back. Now, poor Raven, his foot was already fucked up from earlier in the match because he did a tope over the top rope, and I'm pretty sure he landed on his ankle when he landed on the mat outside and fucked up his ankle. Shane at some point did a clothesline and fucked up his elbow. This match, thank God it ended at some point because, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. And then this match, like, despite that, it's like, okay, we've got for all intents and purposes, a perfectly acceptable main event tag team match. They fought under the crowd, they fought back. We're now going to go in to get a bunch of finishers. And then the finish got fucked up something fierce. So, try to follow me here.
Yeah, I've written this down, so let's go.
Yeah. Glenn Gilberti pulls a chain and goes to use it. However, Jarrett cuts him off by KOing him with a guitar. Raven makes the cover, and Shane Douglas was supposed to grab the referee's ankle and yank him out of the ring. However, Shane either forgot or was horribly out of position because he was in the ring. And then the referee pulled himself out of the ring. I mean, like, he pulled himself out like he was being dragged by his ankle. And the problem was nobody was there. And by the time he started doing that, he saw Shane Douglas in the ring. Why did he do that? Like, he just stopped counting and slid himself out of the ring because Shane fucked up there and missed his spot.
I have another thing to add to this. Did you see what happened with Glenn?
Glenn didn't even kick out.
No, he was out.
Yeah. So then, with the finish now in tatters because the surprise of the match was waiting for his cue, which was not coming, Douglas was given the even flow DDT and had to kick out because that was not the finish. And eventually, Jim Mitchell, of all people, walked out, Eventually, he got in the ring because he was waiting for his cue that never happened. So Raven basically had to give him the Iggy to get in the ring and do the spot. And then, even more eventually, he threw a fireball at Raven for the disqualification. And because everything was so horribly mistimed and fucked up, the show basically went right off the air.
Yep.
That match ended up being a fucking epic dumpster fire by the end.
It was fine until it wasn't. So here's
I still gave it a 2.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 4, so yeah, pretty much it tracks. So let's go over the injury list. Jarrett gassed. Raven screws up his foot. Shane Douglas, you said screwed up his elbow, but that's a day that ends in Y for Shane Douglas. Gilberti, already working with a back, hurts it worse. And because of the guitar shot, by the way, you know how Jeff Jarrett's guitar usually explodes when you get hit by it?
It definitely exploded here.
No, it didn't. Not in the usual way Jarrett's guitar explodes. Because the bottom part exploded, the top part didn't. So this leads me to believe that this was a half gimmicked guitar. Because usually when Jeff Jarrett hits somebody with a guitar, the whole thing explodes. The top did not explode, so I think that was the actual, still an actual guitar. And knowing what those type of guitars are, I think it's fiberglass, and it hurts like hell. So I think on top of his bad back, Gilberti's now concussed because he didn't move until Jim Mitchell got in the ring. And even then, he was groggy. So, yeah, epic dumpster fire. Still a pretty good show.
By the way, 2 disqualifications on this show, which brings the total number of disqualifications done in TNA history to 3. So from here we get the final ratings. Average match quality, despite a lot of crap on this show, thanks to 2 really good matches, we got that average match quality up to a 4.0 this week. Overall enjoyment, I gave it a 6. We had 2 great matches, and the main event was perfectly fine until the most fucked up finish of all time. It's almost as if we had a competent booker. This show could be pretty fucking good. And then future build, 4.0 out of 10, because I can't say I'm super excited for New Jack versus the Sandman, but it should be exactly what you'd expect New Jack versus the Sandman to be. AMW are the tag champions again. Great. Tell me one team who got pushed this week. Tenay and West didn't even get out their opponents, like we mentioned, just saying David Young and before Jerry Lynn cut him off. And so anyway, we'll see where it goes from there. I'm assuming it's David Young and Sonny Siaki, but we'll see next week. Mm-hmm. And that gives us an overall rating of a 4.67. Because yes, in this shit show of a shit show, 4.67, which is less than half, is greater than the average score of this show.
Match quality to me was 6. And the enjoyment for this show was a 7. Like, there was some stuff building. And some feuds that got ended. So we have Kazarian beating Sabin. In theory, that should get him a title shot. AMW's the champs, as you said. We have the Hardhead Tournament Finals. We have this. We have the chase. We have the Raven Douglas feud, which is now in full force, thanks to Jim Mitchell. As we find out, Douglas sold his soul to Jim Mitchell. Go figure. So, yeah, stuff made sense, which is weird to say for TNA. I fully expect to not have this feeling in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see if this makes sense next week. But for now, for 1 week, we actually got a half-decent show this week on TNA. However, if the show was in reverse order and we ended with Triple X and AMW, I'd be sitting here raving about how great this show was. Instead, we went in this order for some dumb reason, and we just get this show was certainly better than average. All right.
It's because Jeff Jarrett has the main event.
No, because we had to have a bonus cage match. Because, yeah.
Because the ring crew are stupid.
Anywho, so that's going to do it for this week's fine, fantastic episode. You got anything to plug before we go?
Yeah, support your local video game store. You'll get some great stuff like Where in the World's Carmen Sega on the Sega Master System, Shining Force for the Game Gear, and I also dropped $160 on a copy of Pokemon Soul Silver.
All right, go play video games, everybody. And with that in mind, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Go Red, go! Go Red, go!